At the end of October, Boston carried its signature chill, seeping through every cobblestone street, making thick wool coats and silk scarves the customary accessories of the elite. The Four Seasons Boston glittered like a giant crystal along the Charles River. Limousines lined up at the entrance, releasing elegantly dressed guests, their smiles tinged with arrogance, their eyes marked by the confidence of those keenly aware of their families standing in the city. Pristine white orchids were meticulously arranged inside the grand lobby atop silk-draped tables. Light from crystal chandeliers cascaded onto Krug champagne flutes, creating a lavish and cold atmosphere. This was not merely Andrew Whitmore's wedding rehearsal dinner, the only son of the Whitmore dynasty, but a performance of power. Every detail, from the Michelin three-star menu to the live jazz band flown in from New York, carried the same message. The Whitmores were not just wealthy. They defined what class meant in Boston. Upstairs, in the waiting lounge, Maya Brooks stood before the mirror. Her sapphire blue gown hugged her frame with understated elegance. She had chosen her mother's pearl earrings, Evelyn Brooks, who taught her that dignity outweighed everything. Evelyn had once been a celebrated civil rights attorney in Baltimore, renowned for lawsuits against discriminatory housing practices. But just days before she was to present evidence against several real estate conglomerates, including Whitmore & Co. Holdings, she died in what police called an unfortunate accident. For Maya, it was a wound that never healed. She looked at herself in the mirror and reminded herself, "I'm not here to become a Whitmore bride. I'm here to close the chapter my mother never could." The door opened. Andrew entered in a black tuxedo, his smile frequently featured on the cover of Boston Business, radiating the confidence of a man welcome anywhere. "You look stunning," he said softly, taking her hand. "They're waiting. Shall we?" Maya smiled, masking the turmoil inside, and followed him down the red-carpeted staircase into the ballroom. The air buzzed with laughter, chatter, and music. Hundreds of eyes turned toward them, admiring, judgmental, and curious. At the center table, Margaret Whitmore, Andrew's mother, sat with regal poise, a deep blue sapphire necklace, once her grandmother's, adorning her neck. Beside her was Charles Whitmore, stern and contemplative, wineglass in hand as though rehearsing a speech. They acknowledged Maya with polite smiles, though their eyes were cool and appraising. As servers placed the appetizer, seared scallops with lemon butter sauce, Maya sensed whispers. Some guests cast her puzzled looks, as if questioning how a woman from Baltimore, without an Ivy League pedigree, could stand beside Andrew Whitmore. Sensing the tension, Andrew squeezed her hand under the table. He launched into a jovial Harvard anecdote, briefly lightening the mood. But Maya knew the real test of the night was yet to come. When the main course ended, the lights dimmed. The MC announced the speeches. Margaret rose, exuding authority. Conversation ceased. All eyes were fixed on her. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice resonant, "tonight marks a milestone for our family. My son, Andrew, is to marry Maya Brooks. And marriage, as we all know, is not just about love. It is about the joining of two families, two histories." Maya steadied herself, though she felt an invisible hand tightening around her chest. "That is why," Margaret continued, "I looked into the Brooks family." She paused, scanning the room to ensure undivided attention. Her mother, Evelyn Brooks, a lawyer. But unfortunately, her career was defined by lawsuits against respectable businesses, including several dear friends here tonight. A ripple of murmurs spread. Margaret's lips tightened with satisfaction. She called it justice. But in truth, many of those cases were little more than opportunistic litigation, targeting families who built and sustained this city. And tragically, she died in a car accident after, according to reports, drinking heavily at a bar. The ballroom fell silent. Some frowned, others smirked. Heat rushed to Maya's face. Evelyn Brooks, the woman who had fought to keep low-income families from being evicted, was now being disgraced before 300 guests. Margaret wasn't finished. She turned to Maya, her tones sweet but cutting. "I hope Maya won't follow her mother's footsteps. But we must be honest. When a family of such background enters the Whitmores, it presents challenges." The room erupted in murmurs again. A few clapped politely, nodding as if Margaret's words were common sense. Then, As though on cue, Andrew stood. Taking the microphone, his voice slow and deliberate. My mother is right. I love Maya. But I've also discovered there are things she hasn't been honest with me about. Maya turned to him, stunned by his calm, almost chilling composure. I believe love is built on trust, Andrew continued. But I've learned Maya concealed parts of her family's past matters many of us would find troubling. And tonight, we must face that truth. The atmosphere thickened with shock and curiosity. This was no longer a rehearsal dinner. It had become a public tribunal. Maya rose. The scrape of her chair echoed as every eye locked on her. Her heart pounded, yet her voice was eerily steady. Thank you, Whitmore family, for turning this evening into a lesson. Rarely does one witness how a powerful dynasty behaves when it expects applause. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Margaret faltered, unprepared for the young woman's defiance. Yes, Maya continued. My mother was a civil rights lawyer. She fought to keep hundreds of low-income families in their homes. She died just before presenting evidence against corporations that, coincidentally, included Whitmore & Co. A wave of murmurs surged. You believe truth can be buried beneath money and power, but I believe justice, though delayed, will always find its path. She set down the microphone, slid the sparkling engagement ring off her finger, and placed it on the table. I am officially ending this engagement, not because of anything you revealed about me, but because tonight you've given me exactly what I needed, proof that arrogance and deceit still thrive in this house. The ballroom froze, then came sharp intakes of breath. A few scattered claps this time, for Maya's courage. She turned and walked down the aisle, her sapphire gown brushing the carpet, leaving behind stunned silence and the disbelief of those who thought they had triumphed. As the ballroom doors closed behind her, Maya inhaled deeply. This was a turning point. The real battle was only beginning. But tonight, she had preserved her mother's dignity and transformed an orchestrated humiliation into a declaration of war. Inside, Margaret Whitmore might believe she had struck Maya down. Andrew might think he had defended the family's honor. But what had truly happened? They had proven before hundreds of witnesses and the hidden recording devices Maya had planted that the Whitmores still manipulated truth to preserve power. Clutching her small purse containing the phone, recording everything, Maya whispered silently, Mother, I've begun. I'll finish what you couldn't. Outside the hotel, the night wind grew fiercer. Maya wrapped her shawl tighter and hurried toward the waiting car. Determination lit her eyes. This rehearsal dinner had never been about a wedding. It was the opening hearing of a long war she had prepared for over 15 years. That night, Boston's elite thought they had watched a tragic spectacle. In truth, they had witnessed the prologue to a historic indictment. Maya allowed herself a faint smile. Phase 1 was complete. It was a crisp autumn morning in Boston, the sky so clear it seemed one could see the ocean's edge. Red brick buildings in Beacon Hill glowed honey gold under the sunlight, framed by maples turning brilliant shades of yellow and crimson. Amid this landscape rose the glass tower of Whitmore & Co., holdings modern, imposing, a symbol of New England's financial power. Inside, the grand lobby gleamed with Italian marble veined like drifting clouds. Sunlight spilled through the soaring glass ceiling. Abstract paintings and bronze sculptures were carefully curated to project refinement at a distance. Receptionists in black suits and white shirts carried the cool detachment of those accustomed to judging who was worthy to pass through these doors. Maya Brooks stepped in. She wore a plain gray blazer, her hair neatly tied back, black leather shoes deliberately unpolished. Her appearance was carefully chosen professional, but understated the look of a typical applicant in the psychological game she had been preparing for months. The receptionist glanced up, eyes flicking over Maya with mild disdain. You're here for the marketing coordinator interview, correct? Her tone carried the arrogance of someone guarding the gates of power. Yes, Maya replied softly, her hands fidgeting as if in nervousness. My name is Maya. Maya Brooks. She caught the receptionist's indifferent look the same look. Her family had endured years ago when her mother escorted poor tenants into courtrooms demanding justice. In the privileged eye, such insecurity proved they did not belong. Nearly an hour later, just as Maya had predicted, the receptionist finally announced, Mr. Whitmore will see you now." The deliberate emphasis on the surname was more than information. It was a reminder of authority. Andrew Whitmore's office occupied the top floor and was larger than most Boston apartments. Dark wood-paneled walls framed shelves lined with leather-bound books and Harvard memorabilia, a silver rowing paddle, a few trophies from his collegiate victories. A Rothko painting hung on the wall not because Andrew understood art, but because the family's designer believed it conveyed power. Andrew rose as Maya entered. Tall, at ease, he exuded the confidence of a man who had never wondered whether doors would open for him. "Please, have a seat," he said, gesturing toward a chair deliberately set lower than his own, an old psychological trick to assert dominance. Maya nodded slightly and sat, feigning unease. Inside, she studied every detail. The narrowing of Andrew's eyes when appraising someone, the faint tapping of his finger against the desk when waiting for answers. "Tell me about yourself," Andrew began, his voice both cordial and faintly patronizing. Maya was ready. She fiddled with her sleeve, handed over a carefully curated resume. "I graduated from Queen's College with a degree in business economics. After that, I worked at a few small marketing firms. I've always dreamed of joining a major corporation, a place where the work truly matters." Her voice trembled slightly, eyes wide with apparent awe. Andrew smiled, the smile of a man convinced he was dispensing opportunity. "Queen's College, Interesting. Sometimes it's those different perspectives that add value. At Whitmore, we believe in recognizing potential, even if the background isn't particularly distinguished." Maya nodded, feigning gratitude. Internally, she noted, "Exactly as expected. He only values people who make him feel like a savior." As Andrew continued asking why she chose Whitmore and what her career ambitions were, Maya carefully wove her answers to feed his ego. She spoke of her admiration for Whitmore and Co.'s real estate projects, though she knew those projects had displaced hundreds of families in Baltimore. She said she wanted to learn from successful leaders like him, though the assets she controlled through shell companies already dwarfed any of Andrew's personal accounts. As the interview wound down, Andrew leaned back in his chair, fingers interlaced. "I believe you have potential. But one thing, my mother and sister are quite particular about the people I work with. I'd like you to join us for dinner this weekend, so that they can get to know you." His tone dripped with the certainty that Maya would consider this an honor, but inside her, a spark of irony flickered. "If the Whitmores think they're evaluating me, they don't realize I'm studying their every move." "That would be wonderful," Maya answered, her voice wavering just enough. I'll try not to embarrass you." Andrew chuckled, tapping the desk lightly. "Impossible. I have a good eye for people." Maya left the office, crossing the vast marble lobby. She glimpsed her reflection in the mirrored glass walls, not the anxious young woman who had just sat in that chair. Still, the strategist orchestrated one of Boston's corporate world's most elaborate psychological experiments. She pulled out her phone and texted Sophia Martinez, her trusted aide posing as her former boss at a cafe nearby. "He's taken the bait. Phase 2 begins." Upstairs, Andrew leaned back, wearing a self-satisfied smile, certain he had just discovered a rough gem to shape. He did not realize that he was the subject of Maya Brooks's experiment, a woman driven by a relentless vow to complete the justice her mother had died pursuing. The game had begun, and this time, the stage did not belong to the Whitmores. Boston gradually sank into an autumn evening as winds from Massachusetts Bay swept into the city, carrying with them the salty smell of the sea. Atop Beacon Hill, the old neighborhood with narrow cobblestone streets, red brick houses, and white-framed windows, the golden glow of wrought-iron street lamps cast a light as if transporting people back a century. Nestled among those historic streets was the Whitmore Club, an exclusive social club into which hardly any outsider had ever set foot. Founded in 1873, the club had once been frequented by railroad tycoons, politicians, and renowned lawyers, and for nearly a century, it upheld an unspoken rule. No women, no people of color, no foreigners. Only in the 1,990 seconds, under pressure from lawsuits and the press, did they reluctantly outwardly open their doors to other groups. but the essence of selectivity remained intact. Andrew Whitmore lightly held Maya Brooks's hand as they stepped through the dark wooden doors engraved with the lion crest. "This is a special place," he whispered proudly. "The waiting list to become a member is over 2 decades long. But luckily, I have the privilege of bringing you in as a guest." Maya nodded slightly, her eyes wide in feigned amazement. She knew she was walking into a crystal box where the wealthy cloaked exclusion in elegance. She also knew that she had purchased the primary mortgage on this building just 6 months earlier through a shell company. On paper, she was the club's largest creditor. But tonight, she would play the role of the lucky girl allowed to enter a world of luxury she supposedly could never touch. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of Havana cigars and burning oak. The ceiling was high with dark beams, and the walls hung with portraits of founding members, all white men with thick mustaches and cold eyes. Servers in black vests bowed to each member as they entered. As Maya passed by, she caught a few glances, fleeting, skeptical. Andrew led her to the main dining hall. Long tables draped in white linen, silver candlesticks, and delicate crystal glasses reflecting golden light. The conversations of middle-aged men mingled with arrogant laughter, punctuated by stories of multi-million-dollar deals. The few women present were dressed lavishly, sitting quietly beside their husbands, smiling at the right moments, like living ornaments. Maya maintained a modest demeanor, gazing around the room with just the correct dose of admiration. But inside, she noted every detail, how service attitudes shifted depending on whether the guest was Andrew or herself, how members roared with laughter at jokes hinting at their superiority, how the women here seemed transformed into decorative proofs of their husband's status. The club manager, Jonathan Park, came forward to greet them. He bowed to Andrew. "It is an honor to welcome you this evening, sir. And this must be Mr. Whitmore's fiancé?" Jonathan's glance at Maya was quick, so that others might have missed it. But Maya saw clearly it was not the assessing look of a servant, but recognition. Jonathan was the man who quietly reported the club's revenues and operations every month to an audit company. And he knew exactly who the actual creditor was. "Yes, please take great care of her," Andrew replied, entirely unaware of the meaning in Jonathan's eyes. "Of course, sir," Jonathan said respectfully. "It will be our honor." Dinner began with New England seafood chowder, followed by imported Wagyu steak. Bordeaux wine from 1982 was poured generously. Andrew chatted animatedly with his Harvard classmates, proudly introducing Maya. "Maya graduated from Queen's College," Andrew said, his smile self-satisfied. "But I have always believed that talent can transcend background. I see the qualities we need more in business, such as her ambition and intelligence." Maya pretended to blush, lowering her head, whispering, "You flatter me." Inside, she mocked, "You think you're elevating me, Andrew, but in truth, you are the one I am studying like a psychological experiment." At the opposite table, a blonde woman in a Chanel dress, Victoria Langston, Andrew's ex-girlfriend, cast Maya a sharp, uneasy, suspicious look. Victoria, heiress of a pharmaceutical dynasty, was accustomed to a world where everyone shared the same background and power. To her, Maya was an outsider intruding. Andrew seemed to sense that gaze. He leaned slightly, whispering, "Don't mind her. She's just jealous. You're the one I've chosen." Maya nodded gently, her eyes flickering with hidden irony. "No, Andrew, I am the one who has chosen you." Throughout dinner, Maya let Andrew explain the artwork on the walls, the club's history, and lofty investment philosophies. She nodded, feigned wonder, occasionally interjecting naive questions. Each time, Andrew smiled with satisfaction, as though teaching a pupil, but in truth, Maya was gathering evidence. The way the men at the table discussed areas needing redevelopment in reality, gentrification schemes to push people experiencing poverty from their homes. The way they spoke of diversity was merely a public relations tactic, while the membership list remained homogeneous. As dessert was served, Andrew leaned close and whispered, "Next week, I want you to meet my mother. She can be exacting, but I believe she'll see in you what I do." Maya smiled softly. "I'll do my very best." But inside, she thought, meeting your mother is the next stage of this experiment, and I need to see whether a man raised in arrogance can truly love an equal, or only when he thinks he is superior. The evening drew to a close. Guests gradually left the dining hall, their laughter echoing behind. Andrew held Maya's hand as they stepped outside, the cold wind sweeping the cobblestone lane. "Well?" Andrew asked proudly. "Do you feel you could belong here?" Maya smiled lightly, her voice tender. "If you are here, I am here too." Andrew squeezed her hand, unaware that beneath her gentle facade, Maya had already affirmed, "I do not merely belong here, I own it." Above Boston, the stars faded against the city lights, but in Maya Brooks's eyes, one star burned brighter, the memory of her mother, Evelyn Brooks, of justice unfinished, and she knew the journey had only just begun. Boston Common was dyed golden on an afternoon in November by rows of brilliant maples. Fallen leaves covered the winding paths, while the sound of a street guitarist echoed beneath the warm sunset. In this setting, Andrew Whitmore prepared for the moment he believed was the pinnacle of love, a romantic proposal to be etched into the memory of everyone who witnessed it. By Frog Pond, where couples often strolled on weekends, Andrew dropped to one knee, holding a blue velvet box. Inside, an emerald gleamed the ring that once belonged to his grandmother, symbolizing the Whitmore legacy. "Maya," he said, his voice trembling not from nerves but from carefully staged emotion, "these past 8 months have shown me that you are the missing piece in my life. Love is not about finding someone who fits into your world, but building a new world together. Will you marry me?" Onlookers stopped, cameras lifted, and a chorus of "Oh" rippled across the park. Maya Brooks stood there, eyes brimming with tears, but deep down she was not crying from happiness. Those tears were part of the performance. For 8 months, she had studied Andrew the way a scientist observes a test subject, how he took her to expensive restaurants, introduced her to art, wine, and fashion, always in the posture of a teacher bestowing knowledge. In his mind, their love story was a Cinderella tale, in which the prince brought an ordinary girl into the palace. But in truth, Maya had already built her own palace, a financial empire worth billions, hidden behind layers of shell companies. She did not need Andrew to enter the wealthy world instead. He was the case study she had chosen to test one question. Could a man born into privilege truly love a woman as his equal, or only when he believed he was her savior? "Yes," Maya whispered, her voice choked. "I will." Applause erupted, and Andrew lifted her in his arms and spun her, joy radiating across his face. For him, it was the perfect moment. For Maya, it was phase 3 of the experiment, and the path to the truth was drawing closer. That evening, in Andrew's penthouse in the Seaport district, the two opened a bottle of Dom Perignon. Through the tall glass windows, the city lights shimmered on Boston Harbor. Andrew raised his glass in a toast. "To you, the most wonderful woman I've ever met, and to us a future no one can stop." Maya clinked glasses, her smile gentle, though inside she was cold. She recalled her mother's words. "You must understand, they will only love you when they think you need them, but when you stand as their equal, that love will vanish." In 8 months, Andrew had never once asked what Maya truly wanted, what she truly believed in. He only relished the moments when he could open doors for her, explaining things to her, lifting her up. Did she love him? Perhaps she loved the sincerity when he draped his coat over her during a sudden rain, when he truly seemed concerned if she pretended to be tired. But that love always carried a condition. He had to be stronger. "Are you worried?" Andrew asked, his gaze tender. "About my family, about my mother. She can be demanding, but I know, once she understands you, she'll love you as I do." Maya nodded lightly, eyes glistening. "I only fear I'm not good enough." Andrew laughed, pulling her into his arms. "You're already good enough. You only need to believe in me." To him, those words were a sweet reassurance. They confirmed her hypothesis to Maya. Andrew saw love as trust in his power, not mutual respect. A few days later, Maya visited Catherine Whitmore, Andrew's mother, at the family estate in Brookline, a classic white mansion with a perfectly manicured garden. Catherine appeared with the poise of a queen, silver hair in a neat bun, a Chanel coat, and a gleaming pearl necklace. "So you are Maya," Catherine said, her smile polite but her eyes sharp. Andrew has told me much about you, but you must understand becoming part of this family is a responsibility, not just about love. Maya bowed, her voice soft. I understand, Mum. I will do my best to be worthy. Inside, she heard her mother's voice whispering, They will test you, they will humiliate you, because they will not accept anyone from the outside. You must be patient. Dinner unfolded under tension. Catherine asked questions about Maya's family, her past, and her mother, and she never missed a chance to suggest that Evelyn Brooks had been nothing more than a state lawyer tied to troublesome lawsuits. Andrew sat beside her, without reaction. He squeezed Maya's hand under the table, signaling endure it, without ever standing to defend her. Maya smiled gently, answering each question with poise, but inside, something broke. He loves me, but he will never choose me over his family. A week later, Andrew announced the engagement at a charity gala at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. The press overflowed with images. Andrew Whitmore, the talented young heir, and Maya Brooks, the ordinary lucky girl. But Maya knew this was no fairy tale. It was a promise built on illusion, where Andrew believed he was granting her a future. She already had a plan that could shatter the entire Whitmore empire. That night, when a reporter asked her, How do you feel about becoming a member of the Whitmore family? Maya smiled and replied, I feel this is only the beginning. No one understood the true meaning of that answer, but Maya knew it well. Yes, this was only the beginning. One day, the truth would come to light, and when it did, this emerald ring would no longer symbolize love, but evidence of an illusion. On a December night, Boston was covered in the first snow of the season. Along Boylston Street, brilliant Christmas lights reflected on the wet, cold pavement, as couples wrapped in wool scarves strolled hand in hand through the common. Meanwhile, at the Four Seasons Hotel Boston, the ballroom was lavishly decorated for one of the most anticipated events in high society, the rehearsal dinner of Andrew Whitmore and Maya Brooks. Outside, black limousines lined up, dropping guests onto the red carpet. Inside, a string orchestra played Mozart, champagne glasses were filled without pause, and tall arrangements of white orchids adorned satin-covered tables. This was not simply a family gathering, it was the Whitmore family's declaration of power to the entire city. Maya Brooks adjusted her mother Evelyn Brooks's pearl earrings in the bridal waiting room. The simple jewelry, set against the gilded room, struck her as a strange contrast truth, clashing with glittering illusion. Sophia Martinez, her trusted aide, entered. All the equipment is ready. Recorders hidden in the table flowers, cameras in the light columns. If they reveal anything tonight, we'll have proof. Maya nodded, her eyes resolute. They think this is a celebration, but for us, it's a trial. The ballroom rang with congratulations as Andrew Whitmore and Maya entered. Andrew, flawless in a tuxedo, beamed proudly, holding Maya's hand as if to assert victory. Maya lowered her head slightly, smiling softly, concealing the storm within her. Catherine Whitmore sat upright at the head table, pearls glowing under the light. Her gaze followed Maya with the cold focus of a predator. Beside her was Charles Whitmore, Andrew's father, quiet, but ever present like a shadow of power. Everything began like a typical extravagant party. Guests sipped wine, chatted about politics, stocks, and the skiing season in Aspen. Andrew escorted Maya from table to table, introducing her as a living fairy tale. Maya is proof that love transcends barriers, he said, prompting a few nods and polite, forced smiles. But Maya saw the skeptical eyes, especially from middle-aged women well versed in this class's unspoken rules. Someone like Maya would never be truly accepted. After dinner, as the orchestra stopped playing, Catherine rose. The sound of a spoon striking a champagne glass rang out, silencing the room. Ladies and gentlemen, Catherine began, her voice sharp as a blade. Tonight was meant to be a joyous occasion, but I believe that honesty is also required to protect our family, so I must share a few words about the woman my son is about to marry. Maya gripped Andrew's hand, waiting for his response, but Andrew said nothing, only nodded slightly, as if endorsing his mother's words. Maya's heart sank. Catherine continued. Maya's mother, Evelyn Brooks, once called herself a civil rights lawyer, but in truth, she was known for baseless lawsuits, designed to squeeze money from respectable businesses, and unfortunately her death came after a night of heavy drinking. A wave of murmurs swept across the ballroom. Maya inhaled deeply, but stayed silent. Catherine pressed on, fixing her gaze on Maya, and her daughter Maya used those stories to deceive Andrew. Her education, her career, all questionable. I can only say, we must beware of those who exploit kindness for their own gain. The room fell into heavy silence. Then Andrew stood. Maya hoped he would object and defend her, but instead, he picked up a stack of papers clearly prepared by Catherine and said, "Perhaps it is time for the truth. I once believed Maya was everything, but I cannot hide from you. She deceived me about her family and career. I don't want this, but I must be honest." Maya felt the world spin. The man who had once knelt to propose was now standing before hundreds of guests, joining in her public humiliation. But instead of collapsing, Maya rose. She adjusted her dress, her eyes sweeping the room. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear. "Thank you, Whitmore family, for this performance. You have shown me exactly who you are, and the 300 guests here." The murmurs ceased. "You think you can bury the past?" Maya continued. "My mother Evelyn Brooks died in an accident the very night she was to present evidence of racial housing discrimination, evidence directly against Whitmore and Co. The files disappeared, and the case was closed. But you don't know this. I've spent 15 years recovering every piece of evidence, and tonight, as you stand here smearing my mother, you've helped me complete the picture." Maya lifted her phone. On the large screen behind the stage, a video began to play. Internal emails, contracts, memos, all proving Whitmore and Co. had used lending and development policies to drive thousands of black families from their homes. Cold lines of text appeared. "Ensure no rentals to this customer group. Redevelopment plan. Eliminate low-income neighborhoods." Guests murmured, many covering their mouths, others rising from their seats. Maya removed the emerald ring and set it on the table. "This wedding is over. From now on, I am no longer Andrew Whitmore's fiancé. I am the daughter of Evelyn Brooks, and I will continue the fight my mother left unfinished." The ballroom fell into stunned silence. Catherine's face paled, and Andrew stammered, "Maya, you don't understand." "No, Andrew," Maya cut in, her voice cold as steel. "It is you who doesn't understand. You don't understand that love is not about rescuing someone weaker than you. You don't understand that you chose silence when the person you love needs you to defend them. And tonight, you gave me the final answer. You can never love a woman as your equal." She turned and walked toward the door, leaving behind a storm of whispers. Sophia's hidden cameras had recorded everything. That night, beneath the glittering chandeliers of the Four Seasons, a great family burned its own reputation, and a woman transformed humiliation into a weapon of justice. The next morning, the Boston sky was thick with gray clouds, snowflakes falling lightly over the Charles River. This was supposed to be Andrew Whitmore and Maya Brooks' wedding day. But at the Four Seasons Hotel, the vast ballroom stood empty, wedding flowers hastily removed by staff, white silk-covered chairs still bearing traces of the night before. No bridal procession, no wedding bells, only heavy silence, like a grave for a marriage that never began. Andrew Whitmore sat in the family penthouse, his tuxedo draped over a chair. He hadn't slept all night. The image of Maya standing in the ballroom, her voice ringing out as she exposed his family, haunted him like a nightmare. But it wasn't a dream, it was truth, captured by cameras, now spreading across social media. His phone vibrated endlessly. Reporters, friends, partners, all demanding answers. On the local news channel, bold letters scrolled across the screen. Whitmore and Co. accused of housing discrimination. Evidence revealed by Fiancé at wedding rehearsal. Andrew switched on the TV and saw Catherine, his mother, leaving the Four Seasons, besieged by reporters. "Did you know anything about Evelyn Brooks's death?" one shouted. Catherine gave no reply, covering her face with a scarf. Her eyes filled with anger and confusion. Andrew clenched his fists until they bled. Never had the Whitmore power felt so fragile. Meanwhile, Maya Brooks sat in her own apartment, overlooking Boston Harbor. The emerald ring rested on the table in its velvet box, a relic of illusion. She had just ended a call with the Washington Post. Their exclusive investigation would be published within 48 hours, using all the data she and Sophia had gathered. Sophia entered, carrying a laptop. Good news. The Department of Justice has reached out. They want to reopen Evelyn Brooks's case. Your mother's death will no longer be treated as a traffic accident. Maya closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. For 15 years, she had waited for this moment, not just to clear her mother's name, but to expose the system that buried her death. How will the world see the Whitmores now? Sophia asked. Maya opened her eyes, her gaze sharp as a blade. They will no longer be a symbol of power. They will become an example of the price paid for building an empire on injustice. That afternoon, the Boston Globe published a remarkable editorial. The wedding that never happened, when false love is consumed by truth. The article described the confrontation at the rehearsal dinner in detail, quoted Catherine's slander of Evelyn Brooks, and countered with the data Maya presented. The image of Maya standing in the ballroom, lights casting across her resolute face, spread across Twitter and Instagram with the hashtag Justice for Evelyn. Netizens called Maya the bride who wouldn't stay silent and the woman who turned a wedding into a trial of justice. Millions of shares turned a private event into a national phenomenon within hours. At the offices of Whitmore & Co., chaos reigned. Employees fielded floods of calls from clients withdrawing funds and investors demanding answers. Company stock plummeted 17% in a single day. One senior manager muttered, "This is worse than a financial crisis. This is a moral crisis." In a closed boardroom, Catherine slammed her hand on the table. All lies. That girl fabricated everything. But Charles, her husband, spoke gravely. "No, Kathy. This is no longer a family matter. This is a matter of law. And we may have left too many traces." Andrew sat silently, head bowed. For the first time, he was no longer sure that love could save anything. Meanwhile, Maya visited a small cemetery in Dorchester, where her mother's grave lay quietly beneath an oak tree. She placed down a bouquet of white lilies, sat, and whispered, "Mother, I did it. I didn't let them dishonor you without consequence. I know this fight isn't over, but at least light has returned." The wind rustled dry grass, as if answering from afar. Maya recalled the night before, the moment she placed the ring on the table, the moment everyone looked at her not as a bride but as a prosecutor. She knew from now on she would never live an anonymous life again, but she also knew it was time to lift her head with her actual name, Maya Brooks, daughter of Evelyn Brooks. The next day, national media exploded. CNN, the New York Times, MSNBC all replayed Maya's image, her powerful words, and the downfall of a great family. On a talk show, a commentator said, "This story is not just about a wealthy family. It's about power, truth, and the courage of one woman who dared to confront an entire system." Elsewhere, on Fox Business, a guest countered, "She's just an opportunist. She called off the wedding and used the media to destroy her future in-laws. This isn't justice, it's revenge." But social media disagreed. The hashtag Justice for Evelyn remained at the top for days. People shared stories of housing discrimination, of families forced out of their neighborhoods, of shattered dreams. Maya was no longer just an individual. She had become a symbol. In the shadows, Andrew stared at his phone screen, filled with images of Maya. She was now a hero, while he was only the man who bowed to his mother, who stayed silent when the woman he loved was humiliated. He remembered when Maya had asked him, "Will you stand by my side?" And he hadn't. Now he realized, the wedding never happened. Not only because the truth was revealed, it never happened because he failed the test of love. He lacked the courage to love Maya as an equal. For the first time in his life, Andrew buried his face in his hands, feeling exposed, small, stripped of the armor of privilege. The story spread far beyond Boston. In New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, activist groups held small demonstrations, raising images of Evelyn Brooks and the slogan, "Justice delayed is not justice denied." And in Washington, D.C., a federal committee declared, "We will reopen the entire investigation into racial discrimination involving Whitmore and Co. and other real estate conglomerates." Maya sat alone by the window that night, watching the city sink into snow. She knew her life would never be the same. No more hiding or pretending to be the ordinary girl. Her wedding would never happen. But truth was her marriage to justice. And that was the beginning Evelyn Brooks had once dreamed of. 2 days after the rehearsal dinner, Boston was no longer calm. This year's storm was not snow, but headlines. On the front page of the Washington Post, bold letters shook the nation. Whitmore and Co. 3 generations of systemic racial discrimination in housing policies. Beneath it, a photograph of Maya Brooks in her blue gown at the ballroom, holding up her phone as evidence, appeared on the giant screen and had become iconic. People shared it everywhere, with millions of comments. Admiration, outrage, hope. Within 24 hours, television networks from CNN to MSNBC aired special reports. They replayed the clip of Catherine Whitmore at the rehearsal dinner, calling Maya's mother a frivolous litigator. Anchors emphasized, "This is not just a personal insult. This is the shamelessness of a class accustomed to trampling on justice." A civil rights attorney on one panel remarked, "What astounds me is that Maya Brooks didn't just accuse with words. She had files, contracts, and emails. Irrefutable evidence." The hashtag Justice for Evelyn remained #1 on social media, now joined by a new one, Whitmore Files. Across the country, people shared memories of families losing their homes and neighborhoods erased by redevelopment projects, branded as progress. The atmosphere was like a funeral at Whitmore and Co.'s glass headquarters in downtown Boston. Once a source of pride, the tower was now surrounded by reporters, protesters, and handmade signs scrawled with "Whitmore equals racism." Employees slipped quietly, trying to avoid cameras, but could not escape condemning eyes. In the top-floor boardroom, Catherine, Charles, and Andrew sat around the long mahogany table, faces pale. Still draped in an elegant sweater, Catherine slammed her hand down in fury. "We will deny everything. We have enough money to hire the strongest law firms." But Charles, hair disheveled, eyes fixed on the notice before him, sighed. "Kathy, this time it isn't a rumor. The Department of Justice has opened a criminal investigation." Andrew sat in silence, his eyes hollow. He heard his mother, his father, the noise from the street, but in his mind echoed only Maya's cold words, "You can never love a woman as your equal." When Catherine turned on him, shouting, "Andrew, you must speak out. You must call Maya a liar," he rasped. "But mother, those emails are real. I saw them." The room fell silent. For the first time, Andrew admitted the truth his family had long buried. In the financial world, the domino effect came swiftly. Whitmore and Co.'s stock plunged disastrously. Pension funds announced withdrawals, banks cut off credit, and partners severed contracts to avoid association. The Wall Street Journal dubbed it Boston's Titanic, a corporation sunk not by financial crisis, but by moral crisis. Days later, FBI agents with bold yellow letters on their jackets entered Whitmore and Co. The footage aired live, stunning viewers. Thousands of documents were seized. A preliminary federal report identified 3 points. The company intentionally excluded black clients from projects, designed loans to trap people with low incomes in debt, and bribed officials to cover up misconduct. Catherine frantically hired New York legal teams, but every time she appeared on television to deny the charges, public outrage only grew. Crowds gathered outside the Whitmore mansion, holding signs, "No more lies." Meanwhile, Maya stepped fully into the light. She did not hide, did not vanish quietly. Instead, she accepted invitations to public hearings. She told her mother's story, presented every piece of evidence, and stood tall before the cameras. The press called her Evelyn Brooks's successor. At one congressional hearing, Maya declared firmly, "No family should lose their home because of the color of their skin. No mother should lose her life for daring to speak the truth. I do not stand here for revenge. I stand here to ensure this never happens to the next generation." The chamber erupted in applause. Millions watching saw not a jilted bride, but a symbol of justice. Andrew, meanwhile, sank deeper into darkness. In his cold penthouse, he drank alone, eyes fixed on screens filled with Maya's image. She was now a national hero. He was branded a traitor. Friends abandoned him. Elite clubs struck his name from their rolls, and contemptuous stares followed him everywhere. He longed for Maya, her smile, and the nights they spent together. But the memory that tormented him most was when Catherine slandered her, and he had chosen silence. For the first time, Andrew understood what it meant to lose everything, not just power, but love. The following spring, the federal trial of Catherine and Charles officially began. The media called it the Watergate of real estate. Images of Catherine, once regal at galas, were placed beside photos of her entering court, haggard-faced. Charles, the man always behind the scenes, bowed his head silently. The Boston Globe headline read, "From Throne to Dock, the Fall of the Whitmore Family." As the dynasty drowned in scandal, Maya founded the Evelyn Brooks Foundation, receiving millions in donations. The foundation aided families forced from their homes and provided scholarships for children from affected communities. A small ceremony was held in Dorchester, where her mother once worked. Residents hung a banner, "Welcome home." Children ran with white balloons through the streets. Maya stood among them and said, "They may have destroyed houses, but cannot destroy memory and justice. Today, we rebuild not just with bricks, but with trust." The trial ended with heavy sentences. Whitmore & Co. was ordered to dissolve, with hundreds of millions in damages. Catherine and Charles were sent to prison. Andrew, for cooperating late in the investigation, avoided jail but lost his honor and career. A three-generation empire collapsed, not by outside enemies, but by the arrogance and lies within. In a final interview, Maya said, "The Whitmore empire did not fall because of me. It fell because its own lies corroded it. I only did one thing. I shone light on the truth." The old Whitmore & Co. building was renamed the Evelyn Brooks Center for Housing Justice a year later. At its entrance stood a plaque engraved with Maya's words from Congress, "Justice may be delayed, but it cannot be buried." Bostonians stopped to read it, some whispering, "This is the true legacy." Maya Brooks was remembered not as a jilted bride, but as the woman who turned pain into a weapon and forced an unjust empire to pay the price. Summer arrived in Boston with stifling heat, yet Andrew Whitmore still felt cold in his small rented apartment in Cambridge. More than a year had passed since the wedding that never happened, since the rehearsal dinner turned into a public trial, and since he had watched his family plunge into ruin. The ancestral home on Beacon Hill had been sold to pay damages. His parents were serving time in federal prison, and he, the man once considered the crown prince of the Whitmore & Co. empire, now lived on a temporary teaching job at a community college. Each morning, he rode his bicycle across the Longfellow Bridge to class. His students were nothing like the peers he once knew at Harvard. Some worked night shifts at fast food joints, some were children of immigrants, and others were single mothers returning to school for better jobs. Andrew, in his worn shirt, stood before them to lecture on urban economics, but he knew it was he who was learning the real lesson, the lesson of life without privilege. When the city fell silent at night, Andrew often reopened old videos on his computer. Sometimes he played the clip of Maya speaking before Congress, her voice ringing, "No family should lose their home because of the color of their skin." Sometimes he froze the image of Maya walking out of the ballroom in dazzling light, eyes blazing, and he appeared only as a shadow behind her. The same question gnawed at him each time. Why didn't I stand by her? Andrew began keeping a journal, a habit he had never had before. In an old notebook, he confessed to himself, the Whitmore son did not fail when the company collapsed. He failed when he stayed silent, when the woman he loved most needed him the most. He wrote every night, like a confession, as if only paper could endure the weight of his honesty. Once, he visited his parents in federal prison. Catherine still held herself proudly, sitting upright, eyes refusing to acknowledge defeat. She said, "Maya destroyed us. You must find a way to restore the Whitmore name." Andrew looked at his mother and saw she still understood nothing. He answered softly, "No, Mother. We destroyed ourselves. Maya only revealed it. Catherine turned away, eyes filled with contempt, while Charles sat quietly, his aged face lined with exhaustion. Andrew left feeling as though he had buried a part of his past. Boston had changed. The building that once housed Whitmore & Co. now bears the name Evelyn Brooks Center for Housing Justice. Each time he passed, Andrew stopped his bike and looked up at the stone plaque etched with Maya's words, "Justice may be delayed, but it cannot be buried." He read them repeatedly, as though they were a verdict upon himself. Passers-by didn't recognize him or pretended not to. The name Andrew Whitmore was no longer linked with power, but with failure. Sitting in his small apartment one evening, Andrew received an email from a student organization inviting him to a panel discussion. They wanted him to speak about the fall of Whitmore & Co. from an insider's perspective. He hesitated, then agreed. That day, standing before about 50 students, he said, "I lived 30 years believing every door would always open. But I have learned that truth does not obey money, and love cannot survive without courage." The room fell silent. For the first time, Andrew felt people listening to him not because they were obligated to respect the Whitmore name, but because they sought a genuine lesson. Yet after the talk, walking home, the ache for Maya returned. He missed her voice and eyes, and the night she laid the ring on the table, she declared the engagement over. He knew his life had turned from that moment, and what hurt most was not the loss of wealth, but the loss of her. News of Maya grew ever more present. The Evelyn Brooks Foundation expanded its work beyond Boston to New York, Chicago, and even Los Angeles. She became a familiar face at conferences on social justice. On a television program, when asked if she regretted not holding the wedding, Maya smiled. "If I had married, perhaps justice would have remained buried. I do not regret it." Andrew watched the interview, heart heavy. He did not blame her. He blamed only himself. One night, he dreamed of Evelyn Brooks, the mother he had never met outside photos in news archives. In the dream, she asked him, "Can you protect my daughter?" And Andrew could not answer. Drenched in sweat, he sat upright when he awoke and realized regret would never leave him. It had become a silent companion, reminding him daily of the cowardice that defined his life. That autumn, Andrew wrote a long letter to Maya. He never sent it, only kept it in his drawer. In it, he wrote, "You were right. I did not stand by you. I chose comfort over justice. If I could go back, I would act differently. But I know that chance will never return. I hope you understand I truly loved you, but my love was not strong enough to conquer fear, and for that, I lost you." The letter never reached Maya, but writing it gave him some relief. He understood regret could not be erased but could be transformed into purpose. He began attending small talks, speaking about privilege, responsibility, and the lessons he had learned from his family's collapse. The applause was never thunderous, but some students came afterward to thank him for his honesty. For Andrew, that was enough. Still, his heart tightened whenever he saw Maya's image in the news. He knew she no longer needed him, perhaps had even forgotten him. Yet deep inside, he still hoped that somewhere, in some hidden corner of her heart, there remained a memory of the man who once, however briefly, made her smile. Boston continued to change. Streets once branded for redevelopment were now fair housing projects. Children ran through newly built parks, unaware of the Whitmore empire that once stood. But Andrew knew and carried it as a scar that would never heal. He was no longer the heir, the prince, or the centerpiece of glittering banquets. He was Andrew, a man seeking redemption by telling the truth and accepting regret for the remainder of his life. On quiet Boston nights, when the wind from Charles swept through his small window, he would hear Maya's words again. "Justice may be delayed, but it cannot be buried." He smiled bitterly, knowing those words were not only for his family, but for himself, the man who had let love be buried beneath his own fear. Boston's winter cut like a knife, its streets blanketed in snow, the Charles River a sheet of frozen glass. Andrew walked through the biting wind, holding in his hand an envelope, an invitation to the Evelyn Brooks Foundation's annual Justice Gala. The words were printed clearly. "The presence of Mr. Andrew Whitmore is especially requested." He read it repeatedly, feeling less like it was an invitation and more like an indictment. That evening, the American Social History Museum blazed with light. In the Grand Hall, portraits of civil rights leaders hung with reverence: Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and among them, a new frame Evelyn Brooks, her radiant face and resolute eyes shining back. As Andrew stepped inside, he immediately felt hundreds of stares. No one looked at him as the Whitmore heir anymore, but as a living reminder of the downfall of an unjust empire. Maya appeared in a simple black gown, her mother's pearl earrings glinting under the lights. She did not need to speak. Her presence alone silenced the room. The host introduced her. "Please welcome Dr. Maya Brooks, founder of the Evelyn Brooks Foundation, a symbol of justice for our age." Thunderous applause filled the hall. Andrew stood in the back, heart tightening. Maya spoke briefly, her voice firm. 15 years ago, my mother lost her life on the eve of presenting evidence against Whitmore and Co. in court. Today, justice has taken another step. But justice is not only about punishment, it is about change. We cannot rewrite the past but build the future. The entire hall rose in a standing ovation. Andrew's eyes blurred with tears. After her speech, an aide led him into a small room behind the hall. Maya was waiting. No flashbulbs, no audience, just the two of them, face to face after over a year. "Maya." Andrew's voice trembled. She raised her hand, signaling him to sit. Her eyes were cold, but no longer furious. "Do you know why I invited you here?" Maya asked, her tone low. Andrew swallowed hard. "To judge me once more?" Maya shook her head. "No. To give you a chance. I do not believe in destroying people. I believe in change. But change must come from truth, sacrifice, and courage. If you truly want redemption, I have 3 conditions." Andrew straightened in his chair, listening. "First," Maya said, "you will publicly confess every wrongdoing of Whitmore and Co. to federal investigators. No lawyers, no bargaining, no concealment. The full truth, even if it makes your family look worse." Andrew drew in a sharp breath. He knew this meant pushing his parents already imprisoned toward harsher sentences, and it might even drag him into prosecution. But Maya's gaze gave him no escape. "Second," she continued, "you will relinquish all remaining assets, every cent. Everything will go into the fund to compensate the families your family destroyed. You will start from nothing, like those forced from their homes by Whitmore and Co." Andrew bit his lip. The small sum he still held was the only thing keeping his life marginally stable. Giving it up meant facing true poverty, something he had never known. "And finally," Maya said, her voice dropping but sharp as a blade, "you will live for 1 year on minimum wage, working a service job, washing dishes, sweeping floors, customer service. No privilege, no exceptions. You will learn to live as those your family once looked down upon. Only when you understand that struggle will you know what dignity means." Silence fell heavily in the room. Andrew looked at Maya and saw not only sternness, but a glimmer of hope in her eyes. He realized this was not punishment, but a lesson. 1 year, 3 conditions could destroy what remained of his old life, but it might also open the only door left to regaining respect, if only from himself. "Do you accept?" Maya asked, her eyes locked on his. Andrew's heart pounded. He remembered the rehearsal dinner when he stayed silent as she was humiliated. He remembered long nights in his small apartment, pouring guilt into his journal. He remembered his mother's bitter glare in prison when he told her, "We destroyed ourselves." And now he knew this was his last chance. He nodded, voice hoarse. "I accept. 3 conditions. 1 year. I'll do it all." Maya did not smile. She stood, extended her hand, and shook his. "Good. You have 365 days. Then we will meet again. If you fail, you will have nothing. But if you succeed, you may find yourself again." Andrew left the room with trembling hands. Outside, the gala music still played. Laughter still rang. But within him, a new battle had begun, not against Maya, not against society, but against his former self. On the snowy walk home, he passed a row of homeless people huddled in doorways. For the first time, He realized he would be closer to them than to penthouses in the coming year. At that moment, for the first time in years, Andrew felt a spark inside him, not the hope of winning Maya back, but the hope that he might finally become someone different and worthy. Day 365. Boston's late autumn was chilly, the wind off the Charles carrying the earthy, damp smell of fallen leaves. The rows of maples along Cambridge Avenue blazed gold, their leaves spinning in the wind before settling on the dew-wet pavement. Andrew Whitmore stood silently on the Longfellow Bridge, hands gripping the handlebars of a rusted bicycle. He looked down at the rippling water, then took a deep breath, feeling something in his chest that was both heavy and light. Today was the last day he had to face Maya Brooks, precisely 1 year after carrying out the 3 impossible conditions. He held a frayed leather notebook in his coat pocket, thick with handwritten pages. It was the diary of the past 365 days, proof of change, or at least the effort to change. He didn't know whether Maya would believe it, but he needed it like a final shield to keep from trembling under her piercing gaze. Andrew had lived a life he had never imagined for a year. He had gone from elegant boardrooms with a glass of champagne in hand to the damp kitchen of a small restaurant where rubber gloves were the only weapon against the icy dishwasher. He had stood in line with immigrant workers to collect meager paychecks, then hurriedly calculated every dollar for the rent on a cramped room. He had learned the smell of grease clinging to hair, bleach eating into skin, and disappointment seeping into every short sleep. But in that life, he also met people he had never truly taken the time to see. Carlos, a Mexican man, always smiled brightly, even while working 2 shifts in a row, to send money home to his wife and children. Jasmine, a black single mother who sometimes nodded off at the break table but rose on time every morning to take her child to school. Mr. Smith, a former factory worker, taught him how to mop faster by turning the broom at a 45-degree angle. They taught him lessons not found at Harvard Business School, lessons in patience, compassion, and the value of labor. There were nights when Andrew nearly broke. He remembered the soft bed in his old Tribeca penthouse, the dinners with Chateau Margaux. While standing in line for discounted end-of-day meals, he often heard the snickers of old acquaintances passing by. "Look, is that Andrew Whitmore? Unbelievable." The words cut like knives into his pride, but he gritted his teeth and endured. Whenever he wanted to give up, he opened the notebook, reread the 3 conditions Maya had set, and told himself, "If I collapse, it means she was right to believe I cannot change." In the first month, Andrew washed dishes at a Roxbury diner. At first, he was clumsy, dropping stacks of glassware and getting yelled at by the manager, but gradually, he became proficient. He learned how to stack bowls, so water drained faster, and pivot to avoid scalds from hot water. One late night, Carlos clapped him on the shoulder. "You've got it, amigo. Not a rich boy anymore." Andrew laughed for the first time in months, a laugh that wasn't forced. In the 3rd month, he moved to a cashier job at a supermarket. The work was exhausting but straightforward. Customers of all kinds. Some smiled, some threw money onto the counter, some snapped because the sale items were gone. Andrew wanted to snap back each time he was insulted, but then he remembered Maya's words. "Fairness begins with how you treat those weaker than you." He reminded himself, "Here, the customers aren't the weak ones I am, so learn to endure." In the 6th month, he took a job cleaning an elementary school. By day, he heard children laughing and playing while mopping the hallways. A little girl asked, "Mister, why don't you work in an office?" He froze, then replied, "I'm learning how to be a person, kiddo." The girl looked puzzled, then grinned and ran off. The answer surprised even him. It had sprung straight from his heart without thinking. Each month that passed, Andrew marked another tally in the notebook, from 1 to 100, from 200 to 300. He no longer counted to reach the end, but to remind himself that each day was a small victory. He also wrote letters to Maya, but never sent them. In the letters, he told of work, of listening to co-workers talk about their dreams, of learning to respect others. The letters stacked up like a silent conversation between him and the woman he loved. And then day 365 arrived. Maya asked to meet him at Riverside Cemetery, where Evelyn Brooks rested. He came early, placing a bouquet of white chrysanthemums before the simple headstone engraved. Evelyn Brooks, lawyer, mother, fighter for justice. Andrew knelt and whispered, "I am not worthy to call you mother, but I promise to live in a way that does not betray your memory." Footsteps behind him. He turned. Maya was there. She wore a long beige coat, her mother's white pearl earrings glinting. No heavy makeup, but her face radiated calm pride. Andrew felt his heart seize. 1 year of longing surged back. He opened his mouth, "Maya," but the words caught. "It's been a full year," she said, her voice low, not cold, but not entirely gentle. Andrew stood, hands trembling. "I did everything. I confessed in court. I turned over all my assets, and I lived on minimum wage. I didn't do it for you, but for myself. But I want you to know I have changed." Maya looked at him for a long time, her bright eyes seeming to see through to his soul. "And what did you learn?" Andrew drew a deep breath. "I learned that money is an illusion. I learned that love cannot live without courage. I learned that before, I loved you the wrong way, loving as if you needed me, instead of loving you as an equal. And I learned that justice begins with treating the people washing dishes beside you fairly." Maya stepped closer, close enough that he felt her breath on his face. "The hardest thing isn't forgiving you," she whispered. "It's believing that you truly changed." Andrew took her hand for the first time in a year. "Look into my eyes. You'll see I'm not the old Andrew." She looked for a long, long time. Then she smiled faintly. "Perhaps you have taken a very long road," Maya said. "But at last, you have arrived where you needed to be." Tears sprang to Andrew's eyes. He didn't need a ring, didn't need a wedding, only this moment, with Maya holding his hand in the cemetery where justice began, was enough. The smile flickered only briefly, but it was like light cutting through thick night to Andrew. He had lived in the shadows of regret for a year, fearing he could never atone. And now, in the slender curve at Maya's lips, he saw the sky open. But he did not allow himself to rush. He knew a few words or looks did not measure change. It had to be proven, lived out day by day. Maya remained silent, studying him, as if to see whether he would grow impatient, revert to old habits, hurrying to conquer, to possess. "Did you bring anything?" she asked softly. Andrew nodded and took the old leather notebook from his pocket. He handed it to her. "My diary, 365 days. I wrote a page a day. It has the days I wanted to quit, the times I cried over a sink of dishes, the letters I wrote to you and never sent." Maya took the notebook and flipped through a few pages. His handwriting was no longer as sharp as before, but a bit unsteady, and the ink was blurred in many places. Some pages were stained, likely with tears. She stopped at one passage, day 122. "Today, a customer called me a loser. I wanted to shout that I once stood on Harvard's stage, but then I realized that reaction would only prove I've learned nothing. I stayed quiet, bowed my head, and smiled. For the first time, I didn't feel ashamed, I felt free." Maya closed the notebook, holding it like a treasure. She offered no praise and showed no overt emotion, but her gaze softened, no longer as sharp as in their previous meetings. "Do you know why I set those 3 conditions?" Maya asked. Andrew nodded slightly. "Because you wanted me to relearn from the beginning, not with money or status, but with sweat and courage." "Right. But there was another reason." Maya stepped to Evelyn's headstone and set the notebook upon it. "I wanted you to meet my mother not through your family's lies, but by walking her path. She washed dishes, lived on scant wages, and faced contempt. I wanted you to understand that she did not break. And if you want to be worthy, you must not break either." Andrew knelt, placing his hand on the stone. "I understand. Every time I wanted to give up, I thought of her. I told myself that if she could be steadfast, I had to be steadfast too. She became the lighthouse guiding me through the dark." They were quiet for a long while. The wind blew, and a maple leaf spiraled onto Maya's shoulder. Andrew reached to brush it off, then stopped midway, afraid she'd think him presumptuous. Unexpectedly, Maya took his hand herself and placed it on her shoulder. "You really have changed," she whispered. "Before, you'd never hesitate to touch me. Now you're afraid of hurting me. That says more than any promise." Andrew's throat tightened. "I no longer want your forgiveness just to ease my own heart. I want your forgiveness because you deserve freedom from the burden of hatred. I want you to be at peace, Maya." Maya's eyes shimmered. She turned away so he wouldn't see the tears fall. "You know, for a whole year, I watched you. I had someone send me monthly reports. I know what you did, how you lived. I saw you sitting outside a supermarket eating a $1 sandwich. I saw you give your shift to Carlos when his wife gave birth. I saw you sit in church, hands trembling, but not walking out. I thought I would see Andrew, who collapsed. But I saw a different Andrew." Andrew stared. "You watched me, not to control you, to see whether you were on the right path. Do you know how afraid I was? Afraid I had set a test too harshly. I feared you'd give up and hate me. But you didn't. You took it day by day, slowly, but steadily. And that is what made me believe." Andrew lowered his head, tears falling onto the wet grass. "Thank you. No one has ever believed in me this much. No one has ever given me such a chance." Maya placed her hand over his chest, where his heart pounded. "This chance isn't for me to save you. It's for you to save yourself." They stood before Evelyn's grave, fingers intertwined, needing no words. The afternoon sun shone down, gilding the cemetery. Andrew felt as if Evelyn was smiling from somewhere, witnessing this reconciliation. "Come with me," Maya said suddenly. "Where?" Andrew asked, surprised. "To tonight's gala. The Evelyn Brooks Foundation is marking 15 years. I'll be speaking, and I want you there." "Me?" Andrew stepped back, his heart clenching. "People will hate me. They'll look at me like a criminal." "Yes," Maya nodded. "But you need to learn to stand in that room without running. You need to face the contempt and still hold your head high. That is the final step." Andrew swallowed. The image of that ballroom surged back the rehearsal dinner, when he stayed silent as she was humiliated. This time he would not be quiet. He took a deep breath and nodded. "I'll go." Maya tightened her grip on his hand. "Good. Then tonight, you won't just meet me, you'll meet yourself again." That evening, the great hall of the Boston Museum of Social History shone brightly. Civil rights activists, scholars, lawyers, federal officials, all gathered for the gala celebrating 15 years of the Evelyn Brooks Foundation. Maya stepped onto the stage in a simple black dress, powerful nonetheless. Andrew sat in the back row, his heart pounding. As Maya began to speak, her eyes briefly sought him in the crowd. She spoke of a courageous mother who had sacrificed for justice, of 15 years of struggle, and of the belief that people can change if they dare to face the truth. Then she unexpectedly called a name. "Today, I want to introduce someone who has walked 365 days on the road to redemption. Someone who once hurt me deeply, but who is also proof that justice is not only punishment, but also a chance for people to relearn how to live." The hall stirred. Andrew stood and walked forward. Every gaze fixed on him was many, angry and contemptuous. He trembled, but remembered Maya's words, "Don't run." He took the microphone, his voice tight but clear. "I am Andrew Whitmore. I was a coward. I let the woman I loved be humiliated to protect my family's honor. I lived in privilege and mistook it for worth. But over the past year, I have learned that true worth lies in honesty, in sweat, in knowing how to bow in apology and stand up to begin again. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I only want to say, I will devote the rest of my life to defending the justice that Evelyn Brooks gave her life for." The hall fell utterly silent. Then, from the front row, applause broke out. Maya. One clap after another followed, until the entire room stood. Not everyone forgave, but everyone acknowledged the courage. When Andrew stepped down, Maya took his hand. No words, no distant promises, just hand in hand, as a new beginning. Outside, the autumn wind blew yellow leaves across the streets. The city of Boston glowed as if opening a different era where justice was no longer a distant dream, but a real journey. And amid it all, Andrew and Maya smiled, knowing that at last they had found each other not in power, but in equality and true love.